Abandoned asylum. It was a stormy night when Dr. Elizibeth Turner decided to venture into the old George Town Asylum. The town had whispered about the horrors that had transpired within its walls for decades. Situated on the outskirts of the town, surrounded by thick, dark woods, the asylum had been abandoned for years. Elizabeth, a psychologist with a fascination for the macabre, had always been drawn to the eerie stories and was determined to uncover the truth. The asylum loomed ahead, its silhouette stark against the stormy sky. The iron gates creaked as she pushed them open, revealing an overgrown path leading to the main building. As she approached, the wind howled through the broken windows, creating an unsettling symphony of ghostly whispers. Elizabeth stepped inside, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The entrance hall was a chaotic mess of overturned furniture, shattered glass, and decaying remnants of the asylum's past. The air was thick with the stench of mildew and rot. As she moved further inside, she noticed strange symbols painted on the walls, their meanings lost to time. A sudden noise made her jump. It was the sound of something scurrying in the shadows. Heart-pounding, Elizabeth continued down the corridor, each step echoing ominously. The deeper she ventured, the colder it became, as if the very walls were alive with the memories of the tormented souls who had once inhabited this place. She found herself in the records room, where dusty files and patient records lay scattered. Elizabeth picked up a file labeled, Case 137, William Carver. As she read through the notes, a chilling story unfolded. Carver, a patient admitted in 1952, had been subjected to cruel and inhumane experiments. The notes described his gradual descent into madness and his eventual disappearance under mysterious circumstances. A loud bang echoed from the hallway, interrupting her thoughts. Elizabeth's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Gathering her courage, she decided to investigate the source of the noise. Elizabeth followed the sound to what appeared to be the old operating theater. The room was filled with rusted medical equipment and stained operating tables. She felt a cold draft as she stepped inside, and the smell of decay was overpowering. On one of the tables, she noticed a dark stain that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Suddenly, the temperature dropped even further, and Elizabeth could see her breath in the air. She turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind her. Panic set in as she tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The lights flickered, and she heard a faint whispering, growing louder and more frantic with each passing second. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Elizabeth spun around, trying to locate the source, but there was nothing but shadows. Just as she was about to give up, she saw a figure standing in the corner of the room. It was a man, or at least what used to be a man, with hollow eyes and a face twisted in agony. "Help us," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Free us from this torment." Elizabeth backed away, her heart racing. The figure began to move toward her, his footsteps echoing in the silent room. She could feel the walls closing in, the air thick with an oppressive presence. Desperation gave her strength. Elizabeth threw herself against the door with all her might, and it finally gave way. She stumbled into the hallway, gasping for breath. The whispers followed her, growing louder and more urgent. She ran, her footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. As she turned a corner, she found herself in the ward where the patients had been kept. The rooms were filled with rusty beds and decaying mattresses. On the walls, more symbols were painted in what looked like blood. Elizabeth could hear the cries of the patients, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of pain and suffering. In her frantic escape, Elizabeth found a staircase leading down to the basement. She hesitated, but the voices behind her left her no choice. Descending into the darkness, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The basement was even colder, the air thick with an unexplainable heaviness. She stumbled upon a series of cells, their iron bars covered in rust. In one of the cells, she saw a figure huddled in the corner. It was William Carver. His eyes were hollow, his body emaciated, but he was unmistakably real. "Elizabeth," he croaked, "you must help us. Destroy the heart of this place." Carver led her to a hidden room in the deepest part of the basement. The room was small and windowless, with walls covered in more of the strange symbols. In the center of the room was a large ornate chest. Elizabeth could feel the evil emanating from it, a palpable force that made her skin crawl. "This is the source," Carver said. "Destroy it, and we will be free." With trembling hands, Elizabeth opened the chest. Inside, she found a heart, still beating, suspended in a jar of dark liquid. The sight was both mesmerizing and horrifying. Gathering all her courage, Elizabeth lifted the jar and threw it to the ground. It shattered, and the heart stopped beating. A deafening scream filled the room, and the walls began to shake. The symbols on the walls glowed briefly before fading into nothingness. Carver smiled, his form beginning to fade. "Thank you," he whispered before disappearing completely. The asylum seemed to exhale, as if a great weight had been lifted. Elizabeth stumbled out of the asylum just as dawn was breaking. The storm had passed, and the first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds. She looked back at the building, now silent and still. The ghosts of George Town Asylum had been freed, but their stories would live on in her memory forever. As she walked away, Elizabeth knew that she would never be the same. The horrors she had witnessed would haunt her, but she had also brought peace to those who had suffered. And in that, she found a small measure of solace.
Dear viewers, if you like to watch the scariest horror stories, do subscribe, like and share our channel. Thank you.